Hello everyone, and this is an introduction to Houdini. So the idea is that if you're using any other 3D software and you've always wanted to learn Houdini, then this series should help you get started. So with the first video, we're going to take a look at the absolute basics, which is the user interface and the navigation within the software, and a few other concepts. All right, so where do we begin? The first question is, what is Houdini, right? So Houdini is a 3D animation software, pretty much like Max or Maya or Blender or Cinema 4D or Lightwave, any of those. There are two major differences between those softwares and Houdini. The first one is that Houdini is entirely node-based. So if you look at it, this is essentially what Houdini looks like. Okay, it's essentially you're building using nodes. So that is the first thing. The other thing is what is written directly over here, which is it is fully procedural. So what does that mean? Like, what do you mean by procedural? So what that means is that rather than just taking an object and starting to manipulate, you generate a set of rules or commands. And these rules or commands are kind of independent of whatever input you have, and they can be transferred to whatever other object that you want, and you can keep replicating the same effect. So for example, let's say I've just created a rule or a set of things, like I want to take an object and I want to twist it and then I want to bend it. Okay, this is fairly simple. You can probably do this in like any software. But let's say this is my rule. This is a twisty bend rule. So then whatever input comes in here, it will keep doing the same thing. So this is effectively a procedural approach. Okay, on a very, very basic level, this is a procedural approach, wherein you are creating a set of rules, saying that whatever comes in, this is what you need to do with it. To do a slightly more complex version of it, let's say I want to create a set of rules saying that select the top faces, and then add some points. So we want to scatter some points and then copy some plants on this. Okay, and so what you should technically get is, if this is my object, then I want to select this much, and then I just want to grow some plants here. So something like that. And so this is again like a set of rules. So no matter what I put in, so whether I put in a sphere or a box, it will always select the top and it will always grow the same thing on top of it. So if I do something like this, and then it will again select the top and just do that. So this is effectively what a procedural approach does. Okay, so that's effectively it. So once you install it and all of that process is done and you start the software, this is what you will be faced with. This is essentially what Houdini looks like. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take a look at the basic user interface and the navigation. And in order to do that, I'll just make a couple of objects. So I will go back to that and how to create objects and all of those things. But for now, just that we can navigate in the viewport and I can show you a few things, we'll just we'll just make a few objects. So on the shelf on top, so this is if you're coming from Maya, this is kind of familiar to you. Maya has shelves on top, So I can just click here, you get a box and you can create a box. And then I'll create a sphere and I'll create a torus. Okay, so this is effectively what you have. So the interface is pretty simple. It's not a very complicated interface. You have your shelf on top, which has a whole bunch of, you can create objects, you have deformers, you have tools for rigging, for character animation. Then you have like particle stuff, rigid body, ocean tools. Houdini is popularly known as a VFX software. So that's effectively, that's a big part of Houdini. So anyway, so you have all of your stuff on top over here. There are other ways to create objects as well and create tools as well, but you have the shelf on top. You can always use that. Now you can also close it. Okay, so wherever you see this black arrow, if you click on this bar, it will close, everything. So it is a nice way to just, if you want to open up space, you can just open up space. And then you can click on the bar again to sort of reopen it. Okay, so it's not gone. You can just, it'll close and you can open it up again. The other thing you can also do is you can click on this bar in the middle and you can adjust the size. You can click here and you can adjust the size. You can also, you can see these small arrows here in the middle. You can click on that to expand or contract, and you can go in either direction. The other thing is if you click here in the middle, you can flip the entire interface. So you can click here and it will flip it. If you keep Alt pressed, if you bring the mouse on it, you'll see it gives you options. So if you keep Alt pressed and do left mouse button, it'll actually make it horizontal, vertical. And if you click on it again, it'll split it halfway this way. So this is essentially, the basic interface. Now it's broken up into 3 sections, as you can see here. So you have the 3D viewport, which is standard to most softwares. On the top right, you have the parameter window. So you'll see the parameters for, whichever object that you have selected. And then bottom right, you have what is called as network view, but this is essentially your node view. So all the nodes that you create, all the objects that you create will be seen here as represented by nodes. Okay, so Houdini, as I said, being a node-based software, this is effectively what you will see. Okay, so this is as far as, the basic interface is concerned. Now, you also have these other 2 toolbars on the side, okay, of the 3D viewport. So you have some basic things here, like you have move, rotate, scale. Okay, you have options here, what you want to select. Okay, so if you right click here, if you don't want to select the camera, if you don't want to select the lights, you have options to not select. And then you also have snapping options here. So in this toolbar, you have basic move, rotate, scale and snapping. And then on the right side toolbar, you have options for, what kind of lighting do you want to see in your viewport. So let me add a light. Okay, just so that you can see something. Again, I will come back to this, but I just wanted to show you, stuff. So I'm just going to take an environment light. And I'll create one more light here. Okay, so you have options as to what you want to see. So if I click here on top, it will be headlight only. So you're going to see the viewport. You won't see any of the lighting, coming in from anywhere. And then if you click here, you get to see the basic lighting, and then it gets more and more advanced as it goes on. Okay, so let me also create a grid just so that, you get shadows or something. Yeah, so if I click here, you can start, it'll start to cast some kind of shadows on it. And then if you come here, so it's basically just, it keeps improving quality. See, so now you're getting shadows. And then you can also select this light if you turn it into, let's say I'll turn it into a grid. And I can right click here and I can say do area shadows. So see, now you have area shadows instead of, just hard shadows. So you can do stuff like that. So you have different options for, seeing your lighting. And because I took an environment light and I put an HDR, you're seeing the HDR having effect as well. If I, sort of rotate it around, you'll see hold on, where's my environment light? There it is. Okay. So if I rotate the environment light, you'll see the effect of the environment light. See. So it's a pretty decent viewport. You can see a lot of information, being shown in the viewport itself. Okay, so this is as far as the tools over here are concerned. And then you can also, I'll just go back to headlight for now. And then you can also see, down here, you have options for, you can see points and you can see normals. You can see point numbers. So basically just element data, right? The things that make up your 3D object. So you have your points and primitives, faces, all of that stuff you can see here. Okay, so you want to see face normals, you can see that. You can see face numbers if you want to see that. So you have, options for that over here. And then the topmost one is to see the grid. So if you don't want to see the grid in the viewport, you can turn that, on and off from here. Okay, so these are as far as these tools are concerned. Now let's look at, the basic navigation. So the basic navigation is fairly simple. when you will drop into Houdini for the first time, it's usually in navigate mode. Like you'll see that the mouse will be a hand, and without having to press any button, you can just start navigating. So if you left mouse button will allow you to orbit, okay, middle will allow you to pan, and right will allow you to zoom in, zoom out. If you want to get out of the navigation mode, press enter, and then you're out of the navigation mode. Now you're in select mode. So it'll, like at the bottom, you can see like it shows you select the geometry and then choose an operation to perform. So now you're in selection mode, which is where you generally want to be. So navigation now, the shortcuts are still the same, except you need to keep spacebar pressed. So if you keep spacebar pressed, and you can navigate around, and you can just do the same thing. So spacebar, left mouse button is orbit, middle is pan, and right click is zoom in, zoom out. Pretty straightforward. Okay, and the same rule applies in the node view as well. So you can always you can middle click to pan, you can right click to zoom in, zoom out, and left click is select over here. Like you can't orbit in the node view, but the middle and right still works. Okay, now other options that you have is, if you can notice, like I can't select anything at the moment. Okay, and that's because in the left hand toolbar, there is an option here which says secure selection. Okay, and you generally want to turn it off so that you can select more objects. But sometimes you want, like if you selected a bunch of vertices or points and you want to keep them and not want to lose the selection, you can turn that on. But it's on by default, so usually you want to turn it off. So the other shortcuts that you have are, if you select an object and you want to zoom to selected, you can press spacebar G, that will zoom to selected, and spacebar H will zoom the entire view. Okay, so when you want to frame the entire view, that is spacebar H, and when you want to zoom to selected, you press spacebar G. The same stuff applies in the node view as well. So if I select a certain set of objects and I press G, it will zoom to that. You don't need to press spacebar over here. And if you want to like zoom to the whole thing, press H, and that will do the same. See, it shows you, like at the bottom, you can see like when I pressed H, it said H is for home. And then if I press G, it will say G is for home selected. Okay, so you can navigate like that. Now, along with that, you also have a few organizational tools for the node view. Okay, the simplest one is L. L allows you to like just organize the entire node tree. You can press Ctrl Z if you want to go back. And if you want to organize just a few selected objects, like maybe I want to select these three and organize them, you can press Shift L. Okay, so L organizes the whole thing, and Shift L organizes selected objects. So you can go, you can pick in. So if you have a long node tree and you just want to organize like these 10 over here and those 10 over there, then you can just select and organize accordingly. All right, so before we continue, let's also take a look at the various types of viewports. So how do you access the front view and the back view and all of that, and also the various shading types in the viewport. So the shortcuts are pretty simple. You do get an option at the top right in the viewport itself. So if you click here, you can set your view. So you can go to perspective, top, front, whichever one you want. You also have different shading types which you can access from here itself. And you can display a lot of different things. So basically what you're getting in this right hand panel is the stuff that you're getting from here as well. So if you want to display points, you can display points, and you want to display point numbers, you can do that. The shortcut to access the various viewports is spacebar and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, so spacebar 1 is perspective, and then 2 is top, and 3 is front, and 4 is right. And then 5 takes you to the UV viewport. Now, the interesting thing also is that if you press spacebar 2, that will take you to the top view. And then if you press spacebar 2 again, it will take you to the bottom view. Okay, so you can the same thing applies with the front as well. So spacebar 3 is front, and then pressing spacebar 3 again takes you to the back view. And then 4 is right and left. Okay, so you can access it that way. Now you can also have different shading types. So those can, as I showed, those can be accessed from here, or you also have this icon on top, okay, which says display geometry smooth shaded. The shortcut is W. So W takes you to wireframe or shaded. Okay. You also have an option here which says smooth wire shaded. So you can see the wireframe and the shaded object, or you can see wireframe, you can see wireframe ghost, which will sort of shade the back faces a little more lighter. So it gives you better depth perspective. Then you have hidden line ghost. You have a bunch of options. So you can sort of choose which one you want. You can go flat shaded. Usually it's smooth wire shaded, and if you press W, it goes to wireframe ghost. Those are the two that I generally work with. So yeah, so that is as far as how you can access the various viewports and the shading types. Okay, so this is as far as the basic navigation and stuff is concerned. Now let's also take a look at how to customize the interface. Okay, so I'm just going to keep this, and we'll take a look at how to customize this. So you have this basic interface in front of you, but Houdini also provides you other interfaces, or what is called as desktops. So it's sort of similar to like if you used After Effects, you get different desktops in there as well. Like I think they're called workspaces. So you get different workspaces and different panels that you can see or not see. You can also build your own custom workspaces. It's similar to that. So what you can do is if you come up here, you'll see something called build. Okay, and this is the currently active desktop as it tells you. So if you click here, okay, and then you can go to, you have like multiple of them. You can do animate, so it'll go to animate. Okay, so this is the animation toolbar, the animation desktop. You can go to games, you can go to grooming. So you have a whole bunch of stuff that keeps happening. It's a very, very flexible interface. Like this is, wow, okay. So there are places where it might change entirely and you might not even recognize the software. But yeah, the default is build. Mostly I work within build and then I just customize a little bit based on what I want. But usually I'm just happy with that. So what you can also do is you can start from scratch, right? So if you want to make your own desktop, you can start from scratch. So if I come into the build menu, at the bottom, or not at the bottom, you'll get something here which says new desktop. Okay, so if you click on new desktop, and it'll start you with a completely blank interface with just one scene view. Okay, so what you can do is it's very, very simple. Okay, like the shells are also gone, but they're still there. Like they're just stored. You can just pick up whatever you want now. So if you click on this arrow at the top right hand, okay, and come to shelf sets, and you have like all of this. So the basic two shelf sets are create and refine and lights, camera, action. So I can say create and refine will give me, all of that stuff. And then I can come to shelf sets and say lights, camera, action. And lights, camera, action has the lights, but it also has all the dynamic stuff. So this brings the shelves back. Now we want to start building the interface. So what you can do is on top of any sort of pane, these are called panes, P-A-N-E. And if you click here on this, it says pane tab operation, you'll get two options at the bottom. You'll get split pane left or right or top and bottom. The shortcuts are the Alt and the square brackets. Okay, so if I take Alt and the left square bracket, you'll split it vertical. And then if I do right square bracket, you'll split it horizontal. And the interesting thing is you can keep splitting this. So no matter how crazy you want, you can keep going. Okay, so it can go pretty crazy, but yeah, you don't want to do that much. Okay, and then once you have sort of split the interface, you can pick what you want. So on the name over here, you can right click and it'll give you what you want. The basic three are on top. Okay, so I can say this should be parameters, and then I can right click here and I can say this should be the network view. So you'll get the network view. See, so you're back to basics. But what you can also do is you can add additional tabs to this. So if I click here, then I can actually add a new pane tab, or I can pick what I want. So let's say you do a lot of Python work. So I can just click here and I can take a Python shell, or I can click here. Maybe I want the help browser. So I can, just get the help browser. And if you don't want it, you can just, click on this and close it. Or you can also drag and drop it, and just switch places. You can also drag it to another one. So I can, let's see if you can do that. See, there you go. So you can actually like just drag it onto an existing tab. Okay, not into an open space. Like here, nothing happens, but drag it like, on that name, it will come after that. So it is a pretty flexible interface. You can sort of like, mix and match and customize in many different ways. All right, so we're done with this. Now, let's do one thing. I'm going to delete all of this and we'll make some objects from scratch so we can just take a look at how to make objects. So we don't need this anymore. So what you can do is just select all of these and press delete, and that's fine. Okay, so we'll start looking at how to create objects. So how you can create objects is, the simplest method is you can go to the shelf and you can click on any object and then you can click anywhere in the viewport. Okay, and that will make the object and make the node for it. You can also, if you control click on anything, it'll form at 0. Okay, so that is also another way. And then if you click, and then when you are moving it around, if you keep control pressed, you can snap it. So if I want to go vertical, or, if I want to go in any particular direction, okay, you can actually sort of like, move it around. So if I want to place it there, see, so now you're, up in the air. So you can place it in, multiple ways. Okay, so let me just make like 3 different objects here. Okay, so once you've made the objects, let's look at basic, move, rotate, scale. So yeah, again, this is on, so let's turn that off. The shortcut is the tilde key. So you can just, yeah, so keep shift pressed and the tilde key. Okay, so that will allow you to sort of turn it on and off. But yeah, it's right there, so you can press it as well. So it's not like, if you don't remember the shortcuts right now, you can watch the video a few times, you'll eventually remember them. Okay, so you can select an object and T is move, R is rotate, and E is scale. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so you can move it in any particular axis. You can move it in 2 axes if you want. And then if you want to rotate it again, like if you click in this gray sphere, you can rotate it, in any direction that you want. The outside circle is rotating from a viewport standpoint. Okay, so your point of view. And then of course you have RGB, in whichever way you want to. And then finally you can also scale it. So again, you can scale in 1 axis, or you can scale in 2 axes, or middle will give you uniform scale. And then you can like, stretch it or whatever you want to do. So yeah, so this is pretty straightforward. Like it's not very, very different. Okay, so this is one way to create objects. So what we did was we created objects from the shelf. Now there is another way to create objects or create anything in Houdini as well, which is generally the more standard approach, which is you can press tab. And if you press tab, you get what's called as the tab menu. And the good thing about the tab menu is you can just type the name of the object that you want or the tool that you want, it'll just create that. So it might seem a little daunting, but over time, once you get used to all the various names and of the tools and whatever, it's a lot faster, rather than trying to go here and look for stuff, it's not like the shelf tool is not useful. There are a lot of good things in the shelf tool. But sometimes when you just want to move really fast, the tab menu is a lot faster. So I can press tab here. Let's say if I want a torus, I can just create a torus. Okay. So the way it works is fairly simple, right? So let's say if I want to create a sphere, so I can just press SPH. Okay. It'll sort of navigate to that. Press enter. It will connect to the mouse and you can move it around. If you left click, it'll make it wherever your mouse is. If you just press enter, it'll make it at 0. Okay, so you can sort of pick and choose wherever you want to place it. Like if I want another box, and if I just press enter twice, it'll just create it at 0. And then you can move it around, wherever you want to. This is actually in general the more preferred way. Like after you've done with this series and you start watching other stuff, you'll notice that a lot of people traditionally go through the tab menu. Okay, because that is usually what is done. Okay, so now that we've seen how to create objects and how to move, rotate and place them, let's also take a look at one more thing before we continue, which is how to customize your nodes, because we saw how to customize the interface. You can also customize the look of your nodes, okay, which is actually important. Like, it might seem like a gimmick, but it is important because Houdini is a node-based system. And what happens is most scenes are not going to be 6 nodes. They might be a lot more than that. And you want to be able to quickly spot a particular node. Okay, like when you have a node tree which is like 200 nodes, you want to be able to spot your important nodes as quickly as possible. And to do that, you want to have tools that allow you to customize the color and the shape of a node, because it's easy to spot. So you do get those options here. Okay, so on top, in the network view towards the right, you'll see this thing called color palette and shape palette. Okay, so the shortcut is C for color palette and Z for the shape palette. So the color palette is simple. You can select any node and you can click on a color. Okay, so it'll just, you can also select more than one and give it a color, so that's also fine. And then the other option is if you press Z and then you get options to shape them. Okay, so you can select this, you can shape it, any which way you want. So the advantage of shaping is that even if you're really far away, you can still spot the shape. So it's very easy to know, what you want. Okay, now, because the great thing about this is that even when Houdini is making objects, it also customizes shapes of specific nodes. So like when I create a light, the light will shape like a light. Or if I make a camera, then the camera is shaped, roughly like a camera. So it's easy for you to know that, okay, this is a camera, this is a light. It's easy for you to get that. Now, other things that you can do with, within the node view is you can also put them in folders. Okay, so what you can do is you can select a bunch of these, and if you come here, it's called a network box. So it will create a box. Okay, and then you can name this box to something. So let's call it objects 1, and then I can select this and I can click here again and I can call it objects 2. So it's easy for you to spot, and you can also color this thing. So I can click here and I can, color this whole thing to something else. So you can sort of, organize things this way. Things can start getting very colorful. And along with this, you also have this option to put in post-it notes. Like you can put in like a sticky note. So if you are transferring a file to someone else, or, you just want to remember something that you have done, so you can actually create a note for yourself. So you can click here, it'll create a note, and you can type whatever you want and just keep it. So this is really good. Like, again, it's great as a self-help, or it's also great as just if you're giving the file to someone else and they want to know, okay, which is the important node here, where are the parameters that I need to modify, you can just, write in a small note over there so they know what they need to look for. So it's nice that way. Okay, now as a file, if you don't want these, like you can just select and delete them. So like if I don't want the network boxes, I can just select the network box and delete it. It won't delete the objects inside, but it'll just, delete the network box. And the good thing about network boxes is also that you can minimize them. So if you have a lot of nodes and you just want to minimize something, you can actually just, minimize it. It's nice. Okay, now this is as far as, basic customization is concerned, but you can also, let's also look at one final thing, which is how to navigate within this view. Okay, like sometimes if it's spread out too much and there are lots of things that you want to look for, Houdini has a new tool called as quick navigate. Okay, which is shift and the slash key, the slash above the question mark. I don't know if that's the forwards. I think that's the forward slash. I get confused with that. Anyway, so what you can do is, if you do shift and forward slash, it goes to the first object that's been created. But what you can do very easily is I can just type in the name of the object. And you can see it's directly trying to go to, like if I want to go to sphere object 2. So see, it can go to like sphere object 2. Or if I want to go to, see, now you can go to torus. Okay. Or maybe I want to go to tube. See, you went to tube. So it's very easy to navigate. Like if you have named certain nodes and given them specific names, you can very easily just open up the quick navigate and it will go to that particular place very fast. Okay, so you don't need to exactly remember where it was. As long as you remember the name, you can just navigate to it very, very quickly. Okay, so that's effectively it. So this is as far as, the basic interface is concerned. Now let's do one thing. I'll make a very simple scene. Okay, so before we build a scene, there is one final thing that I want to cover. So we're going to cover this in a fairly basic way, but it is important. So we're going to cover something called contexts. So what exactly are contexts? So what Houdini does is Houdini has things broken up into different contexts. So modeling or geometry creation is a context, dynamics is a different context, and rendering is a different context. Okay, and based on which context or which area you are in, the tools available to you will change. Okay, so it's very easy to sort of navigate and organize things. So the way they are named is fairly simple, but it might seem a little weird because the way Houdini works. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to write them down. But you get SOP, which is essentially short for surface operators. So OP is operators. So as you start learning Houdini, you will start hearing these terms a lot. So whenever you hear like this, if there's an OP at the end, the OP stands for operator. Now, some things have multiple names to them. Okay, so SOP is also called as geometry. So if you make a geometry folder, you're creating a SOP folder. So SOP and geometry is the same thing. And then you have DOP, which is dynamics. POP and DOP is pretty much the same thing. They both go to the same area, but POP is particles. And then you get ROP, which is for rendering. I have no idea why I'm not typing this, but I have great handwriting, so why not? Okay, and then you get other things. So you have something called as CHOP, which is channel operators, which is good for manipulating animation curves and data like that. Okay, and then you have something called COP, which is for compositing. Now there was an older context called SHOP, which was for materials or shaders, but that has been replaced by what is called as a material net. So I don't need to put the full form of this, but it's the same thing. It's just a newer context. They both are still valid. You can use both of them, but mostly you use the material net. But if you ever go to an older tutorial and they're using the SHOP net, don't be worried, it still works. Okay, and then now you have a brand new area called LOPS, which is for lighting. And then you get something called TOPS, which is essentially for building dependency graphs. Okay. Yeah, so there's a fair bit of stuff here. Now, as far as naming is concerned, as I said, SOP is also called geometry. DOP is called dynamics. You don't need to worry about that. Rendering is also sometimes called output. So if you see the term output, it's basically looking for a ROP network. And then compositing is also called image, because you're manipulating images. And CHOPS is also called motion effects. Yeah, the rest of it is pretty much, the way it is. So LOPS is currently, like, if you want to look for videos, there is a very nice video which was done at SIGGRAPH. You have to look for Solaris. So Solaris was the code name for LOPS, like when it was in development. So if you look for Solaris, you'll be able to find a LOPS video. But yeah, so this is everything, that is there. So if you come in here and when I create, if I start typing in geometry, you can create a geometry folder. Any object that you create is technically making a geometry folder. And then I can press tab and I can type in dynamics. Also see, it gives you a DOP network. I can create a SHOP network, which as I said is now not used as much. I can create a material network. Okay, I can create a ROP network. Okay. And the interesting thing is, I won't create all of them, but these are all the basic ones. And as you can see, like when I press tab here, you're getting this list of tools. But when I go inside any of them, Okay, and over here towards the top left, you'll see it says objects. Okay, so you're currently at object level. But when you go inside any of these, you'll see that this area changes. So this is essentially a folder. Okay, like when we pressed quick navigate, it showed you like, see, this is a folder. You know, like if I start typing in obj slash, okay, see, so I can actually, like, as you can see, it basically follows like a directory structure. Okay, so you can sort of go into those. So these are all technically just folders. Okay, so I can just come in here and now I'm at geometry level. And what you'll see is if you press tab now, the list completely changes. And similarly, if you want to come up, you can just click here and it'll allow you to come up. You can also press and select something and press enter to go inside, and then you can press U to come up. Okay, so that is something that works as well. If you come into .NET, so now you're in Dynamics. If I press tab again, like now, like you have FEM, you have POP networks, and you have, you know, different kinds of solvers. So you are now in Dynamics area. If you come into Material Network and press tab, see, so now you're in the material area. So you can make materials. And if you come into ROPNet and press tab, you'll see that now you have, you know, rendering options. So if you want to take your renderer, you can take your renderer from here. So these are all the various contexts, and we will get into this in a little more detail. But this is a very important thing in Houdini, because what it does is that depending on what you are working in, you have to make that specific context, and it allows you to sort of, you know, segregate and keep things more organized rather than everything being in one place. Okay, so now that we've seen the basic user interface and navigation and customization of Houdini, let's make something. Okay, so nothing complicated. I just want to make a simple scene, and I want to add some lights and a material and just render it. Okay, now the thing with rendering is that in Houdini 18, the rendering system has changed pretty drastically. So the older technique is still completely valid, but there is a completely brand new area for doing lighting and rendering. I'm not going to cover that right now, okay, because that's a completely different thing. I will be covering it in this series, and there are quite a few videos that will allow me to cover that. For now, we'll take a look at the older technique. There are a few older techniques that I will cover in this series for a simple reason, because there are a lot of older tutorials that are available, which naturally will follow older techniques. So the point is, knowing the older method is good so that you don't get confused when you're looking at older tutorials. Like, you'll still be able to learn from it, and then you can also adapt it to the newer method yourself. Okay, because if you just look at it and you don't know what the older method is and you just get thoroughly confused, then there's no use of that tutorial. So you might as well know the old method, just, you know, that you can still get information from the older tutorials. Okay, so let's just make something. Okay, so we'll do a simple scene setup. So what I'll do is I'm going to press tab in the viewport, and I'll take something called as test geometry. So Houdini gives you a bunch of test geometries. Like in Blender, you get that monkey, you get like a bunch of test geometries here. Okay, so you get something called as rubber toy. I like the rubber toy. Okay, so you'll just create the rubber toy and press enter, and you have the rubber toy. Now by default, the rubber toy comes in with, you know, with a shader applied to it, but if you don't want it, you can click here and get rid of the shader. Okay, and then we'll also create a grid, so I can, you know, control click here on the grid. It'll make a grid for me. So I'll just scale it up. So I'll just come to the uniform scale and I'll make it like say 5. Okay. Now there are other ways to manipulate these numerical areas, but we'll do that once we come into, you know, properly modeling something. Okay, so this is my basic scene. It's nothing fancy. I just have something here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a camera. Okay, so I can click here on no camera, and you can just click new camera. And what that does is that it just, from whatever angle you're looking at, it creates a camera. Okay, so it's pretty nice. And then if you want to navigate from the camera standpoint, you can click here. Okay, so this will allow you to lock the camera to the view, because otherwise, like right now, if I try to navigate, it leaves the camera view. Okay, like you can see that we've made a camera. There you go. But if you want to lock the camera to the view, you can just click, like select the camera here, you'll see like it'll show you camera 1, and then I can click here, and now I'm navigating from the camera standpoint. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to add some lights. So we can add that here. So I can press tab and I want to take an environment light. So I'll take an environment light and we'll click it to like high quality lighting so we can, see that. And then like in the light option, you'll have something called environment map from where you can take an HDR. Okay, so again, very basic stuff. If you're coming from any other 3D software, none of this is confusing. This is stuff that you pretty much done everywhere. So it'll take an HDR, it'll take an EXR, whichever one. So I have like a ready-made HDR. You can take anything that you want. Most of these are downloaded from like HDR Haven, so you can just, pick them up from there. You can come to transform and let's make it like 45 degrees. Yeah, so you have some light coming from there. And then let's also create another light. So I can click here and yeah, let's just move this to this side. Yeah, and we'll change it to like an area light, or let's just change it to a sphere. Okay, and we'll lower the intensity. It's too bright. Okay, this is fine. Okay, now I want to create a couple of materials just, to make something. So I'll press tab and we'll take a material network. And what you can do is we can take something called a material palette. You click plus over here, I can go to paint tab and come to legacy rendering and you'll find something called material palette. Okay, so you can click material palette and the basic material is called a principal shader. So it has multiple folders. Where we want to go is material net. Okay, or we can rename that. Let's rename that to my materials. So you'll see that here. See, it says my material. So I want to open that and I want to be there. Okay, so you can just take principal shader, drop it in, and we'll take like 2 of them. Okay, so let's call this as grid and let's call this as toy. And you can just drag and drop it. Okay, and assign it. So pretty straightforward. And you'll get these, once you come back, you'll see that it's inside that particular folder and you've created these 2 materials that you had. And then I can just, let's give it some color. So the grid, let's make it red. And then the toy, let's make it slightly brighter. And then you can click here to come back to your geometry. We'll press L to just, organize it. And then lastly, I want to create a ROP network, which will allow me to create a render engine. So the default render engine in Houdini was Mantra. There is a new one now, but we're not using that at the moment. So you can just double click in here, press tab and take Mantra. So it will create a render engine. I'm not going to go into parameters or anything at all like that. I'll just create this and that is fine. And then lastly, I just want to render it. So this is fine. So I can just come into Windows and we'll create a new floating panel. And I can right click here, go to legacy rendering and something called render view. So the camera default goes to 1280x720. So if you select the camera and if you come into view, you'll see that the resolution is kept to 1280x720. Let's make it small for now. So I'll make it 640x480. And then up here, it will ask you like, okay, which is the render node? So that is Mantra, which is the camera. So I can say camera 1. Okay. And that's basically it. So if you press render, it will essentially it will prepare the scene and it will render it. Yeah. So there you go. This is interactive. Okay. So if you move the object around or something, you can actually like, interactively adjust it. And if you want to do a final render, you can turn this off. So now it will do a final render. So yeah, that's essentially it. So once you've done the final render, if you want to save it, you can just right click here and you can say save frame. Okay. And you can save it to whatever format you want to save. If you want to save it as a JPG or, whatever you want, you can just save it from there. Fairly straightforward. And it's still in interactive mode. So if you want to stop rendering, you can stop it from here. Yeah, so this is nothing special. I just wanted to, end it on a note where, okay, this is how you render something in Houdini. Because at the end of the day, every 3D software is primarily about, you want to get a final result out of it. So you should know how to get a final result out of it. All right, so that's essentially it. So this is what the Houdini interface is like, and how to navigate, and how to make objects, how to customize the interface, how to customize the nodes. And finally, the various contexts in Houdini and basic scene setup. So starting with the next video, we are going to take a look at how to do basic modeling in Houdini and how to utilize procedural modeling. So what is the advantage of modeling in Houdini and how proceduralism helps. So that's what we'll start with. So that's the next video. I hope this one is useful, and yeah, keep watching.